Ricciardo has sparked his return into F1 yet again, and this time it seems like he's understood the impossibility of the task to drive for a top team like Red Bull straight away, which is why he teased another alternative way of coming back in the sport. With Perez's recent slump of performance, Horner has done everything he can do to defend the Mexican driver, but it's evident that he's slowly but surely becoming a liability for Red Bull in terms of achieving their ultimate goal, finishing 1-2 in the Drivers' and number 1 in the Constructors' Championship. So, even though it would be a hard-fought battle, could we see Ricciardo and Verstappen reunited down the road? Now, in order for us to understand this question better, we need to talk about two anchor points: Perez's recent slump in performance and Ricciardo's possibility of driving to a top-notch level as he did back in his Red Bull days. Perez has risen to be the only championship challenger to Verstappen in the first couple of races, coming as close as 6 points to his teammate's lead after his latest win in Baku. But from that point on, he's failed to enter Q3 in 3 consecutive races: Monaco, Barcelona and Montreal. And the ability to close up the gap to some of the slower drivers compared to the RB19, such as Mercedes and Ferrari, speaks volumes about where Perez currently is. To add salt to the wound, it's evident that Perez doesn't have issues with the car in terms of not feeling as one with it, but it's more or less the pressure that the championship fight has put on his shoulders. You're either made out of championship material or not, and in this case, we can see that Perez might be the best number 2 driver for a top team, and that's it. Helmut Marko and Christian Horner have continuously slammed Perez for his lousy performance, with the senior advisor for the Austrian team saying that he needs to wake up from his championship dream and focus on what's more important: the team's goals. But how is this all affecting Ricciardo? We're seeing statements from Aston Martin that they can now fight Red Bull in terms of gathering data from the wind tunnels, and Toto Wolff said that in the second half of the season, the gap to Red Bull will be shortened massively. This means that both of these teams will have at least 1 or 2 drivers that would constantly push Verstappen and bring the best out of him, something that could easily go south for the Dutchman, given the fact that he doesn't have the support of his teammate due to his slump of performance. Even if Perez was performing at the highest level, the last thing he would do is help Verstappen with yet another championship, which we could witness from the 2 races that Perez won this year, Jeddah and Baku. This might be one of the reasons why Red Bull would be more than happy in exploring Ricciardo's option to return to Red Bull until some of the juniors prove that they have what it takes to take that second seat next to Max Verstappen. As Horner said, the worst thing that an F1 driver could go through right now is having the Dutchman as his teammate, because if we're being honest, you have to compete against a generational talent and a driver that's being brought into the competition once every decade. Ricciardo has spoken about a potential return to Formula 1 yet again, and although he still holds the attitude that he wants to retire with Red Bull, the team that started it all, labeling this as his fairy tale ending of his F1 career, he understands that hopping in a top performing team after 2 bad years with McLaren and 1 year off is going to be a challenge much easier said than accomplished. Therefore, an interesting option has opened up for Ricciardo, one that's a bit inconvenient and rather steps up from the normal pattern of Red Bull, and that's the Aussie driving for the sister team of Red Bull, AlphaTauri, before hopping to replace Perez in Red Bull. When talking about this matter, Ricciardo said, "This for me would be like the fairy tale. Honestly, the fairy tale ending would be to finish my career here in Red Bull if I could have it my way. But we'll see. I probably have to work my way up a little bit, but it's really nice to be here." Ricciardo had a couple of options back when his contract with McLaren was terminated, such as Haas and Williams, but it turned out that the Aussie felt that if he doesn't drive for any top performing team, he doesn't want to perform at all. An AlphaTauri return would make sense, given the fact that Vries has disappointed us all in terms of whether or not he's made out of F1 material, even though his 2022 Monza performance has got us all on our feet and applauding for what he did in a car that he barely knew for an hour. But at the age of 26, starting your F1 career might be a tricky challenge to overcome, and that can be visible from what De Vries is currently experiencing in the sister company of Red Bull. Still, even though Marko gave De Vries the yellow card in terms of him having to improve the performance sooner rather than later, otherwise he would be replaced, he didn't confirm that Ricciardo would be the considered choice after this scenario would see the daylight. For example, there are drivers like Ayumu Iwasa, Dennis Hauger and Liam Lawson, who are all part of the Red Bull's academy, and all of them are eagerly waiting to prove that they're made out of the same material Verstappen is. Before this becomes a reality, however, many years might pass and there could be a grey zone in which Red Bull would need the services of Ricciardo, a driver that nobody hoped would witness the fate that he did. The fact that not many other teams have available seating for Ricciardo, with Mercedes and Ferrari having their drivers secured for at least 2024 and the Silver Arrows continuing the contract talks with Hamilton, Ricciardo's only shot at the Red Bull seat would be if he manages to prove the senior team that he can deliver the results that are expected from him in AlphaTauri, the former Toro Rosso team, where everything started for Ricciardo and his Red Bull voyage. What goes heavily in his favour is the fact that Perez is not feeling comfortable with a lack of pace right now, and before the beginning of the 2023 season, he was very confident that Red Bull gave him a car that would match his and Verstappen's skill sets. Obviously, in the first couple of races, that was obvious to witness. But once Perez started to make claims about him being competitive and winning the championship in 2023, things have gone south for him yet again, just like they did in 2022. When talking about the recent slump of pace, Perez went on to say, "Today was a bit of a surprise. We just didn't have the pace. It's important that we take time to understand the weekend because this race, in particular, has been poor in pace and we need to get on top of it. We did struggle. I think we got hurt massively with the safety car, that it came at the wrong moment for us. Luck is not with us at the moment, but it is how it is. I was particularly struggling under braking and the ride hasn't been great." Again, Perez urged Red Bull to dig deeper into his issues and figure out what's happening, but it's safe to say that the team isn't likely to do this because both of the cars are the same, and for the first time ever, Perez might have to accept the fact that he cannot fight for the championship, and P2 is the best result he could possibly get at the end of this season. Now, given the fact that Fernando Alonso is now just a handful of points behind Perez in the Drivers' Championship and has delivered a chilled response when he was asked whether he can fight Perez in the Drivers' Championship by a simple yes, time will tell whether the Mexican can hold on to this front for too long. And according to Christian Horner, the issues that Perez withstood with his tyres are not something that is fixable on the car, but it was just that he didn't have any pace to be any better, which only prompts the bigger question: is Perez done with Red Bull after struggling in 3 consecutive races? Verstappen has also slammed his teammate, saying that his lack of pace is none of his concern, and although he would feel bad if he was in his place, that's nothing he has to deal with right now. As of now, there are some strong indications that Perez's time with Red Bull is slowly but surely nearing its end. And with Horner, Marko and Verstappen all pointing towards the Mexican driver as the weak link in the team, the reunion between Daniel Ricciardo and Red Bull might be a strong possibility. Although, again, that would be through an alternative way, with the Aussie taking up the hard road from AlphaTauri to Red Bull, something that the Austrian team is yet to be asked about whether it's worth investing or not.